we have a fun week ahead of us. We are going to be looking at what are the three main functions within a camera and the three main things that you have to alter in order to capture a good image if you are using a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera. And if you're using your phone or your iPad, those are still good, but these things happen automatically on your phone. It still is including what is the shutter speed going to be? What is the aperture of it? What is the ISO? All of those things, if you're taking pictures with your phone, are automatically in them. It's just doing it automatically without you knowing it. Where with one of these, you are setting those and have a little bit more control of them because we can interchange the lens, right? The lens in your phone is fixed. It's attached to your phone. You can't change it. But these three principles still apply, which is why if you ever wonder maybe why your phone won't take as good of a picture as maybe one of these, it's because those three settings are usually fixed and controlled by the phone. You don't get a lot of your own input into what that setting should be. And these three settings are aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. And this week we're gonna do an activity where you're going to practice those activities, okay? So at the end of this video, I will put an instructional video attached to this, which does outline how you actually go through the activity, changing ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. So let's talk about what these three words are, okay? And we're gonna start with aperture. Aperture is part of the lens. So it's not in the camera body, it's what different lenses are. So I can take this lens right off the camera if, I can. And I'll try to line it up with the wall. This that you can see straight through, you can see the light going through that hole right there, that's the aperture. Aperture is referring to the size of the aperture, right? This dial that you can make smaller or larger and let certain amount of light in. So that right there, and I'll line it up with the blue sky, that's the aperture. That's showing how much light can travel through the image. Changing that, when I hook it up to the lens, I can pick different apertures and it will electronically tell that sensor to be bigger or smaller. And sometimes it can go super small, where if I was to hold it up, you probably wouldn't be able to see through the actual lens because the hole would be so small. Now, you're probably wondering though, it's like, well, what's it matter how much light can travel through a lens or through the aperture of the lens? If you have a large opening, obviously that allows more light to reach the sensor to come into the camera, but that limits how much is in focus. That is where you are getting a narrow field of view, narrow focus line, right? If you can think of the depth of things that would be in focus, the larger the aperture comes, the smaller blade of focus, which means if I was to hold my hand up, my hand might be out of focus, my face might be in focus, but the back wall out of focus. That's what it means when I'm saying you have a very limited field of view that's in focus, right? I know it's with my camera. My camera right now has, and I'm gonna explain it now, has a very small aperture. Smaller apertures, smaller openings allow for more to be in focus, which is what this is right now, right? I hold my hand up, my hand is in focus, my face is in focus, and the back wall is in focus. But everyone's seen the images where only some parts are in focus and some parts are blurry. The blurriness is what we call bokeh, right? Bokeh is if I'm trying to create a blurry background, and that is by opening up your aperture, letting in lots of light, but limiting the amount of focus, okay? This week's activity is, by the end of today, you're doing the activity, it's gonna make more sense if what I was saying is a little bit confusing. But large opening, lots of light, little area of focus. If I was to shrink it down, means less light can get in, but lots are gonna be in focus, like is what we have going on right now, where my hand's in focus, my face is in focus, and the back wall is in focus. I wish on this phone right now I could do that quick switch to make it, it's like portrait mode. Everybody knows portrait mode. Portrait mode is the opposite of this right now, right? Where I would be simply in focus and my background would be blurry, right? They call that portrait mode because you're trying to focus on just the individual. Now the downfall to that is because your phone, the camera on your phone, does that digitally, right? It reads who the individual person is and then digitally blurs everything around it. Where this, if you ever hear the word optical, this is glass. Glass, like a magnifying glass or a telescope, optically creates that blur. It's not doing it artificially and digitally just blurring it. It's doing it through actual glass. That's why it looks a little bit, I'm gonna use the word better just because with these, that's what you're paying $1,000 for pretty much the lens, is that bokeh, right? To create an optical blur rather than a digital artificial blur. Even though with phones nowadays, so this is only, portrait mode's been out for a few years now, but let's say we jump 15 years into the future, the ability for it to do portrait mode and blur it to make it seem natural is just gonna get better and better, right? That's technology. Current state of technology, this still creates a better optical blur than a digital blur on our phone, but if we fast forward 10, 15 years, who knows how technology is gonna advance in the photography world. So that's what an aperture does. Aperture controls the amount of light coming in and how much is in focus. The difference being this image right now with my hand, my face, and my background in focus, or let's say I hit portrait mode and I was in focus but the background is blurred. That's what aperture does. It controls that. We have the words of just taking a picture in portrait mode, but that's what you're altering. You're altering the aperture for your phone. Second thing is gonna be shutter speed. Shutter speed is gonna be inside the camera. So aperture is in the lens, shutter speed is the camera. It's how quickly can a camera take a picture. So if I push the button down and go, taking a bunch of pictures, maybe it can take 10 images in 1 second, right? That's because the shutter is opening up the light that traveled through the aperture. The shutter opened, the sensor was exposed, and then the shutter closed again. The faster you can have a shutter open and close, that's referring to capturing fast-moving objects. So I'm gonna throw out a number. Say I had the shutter set at 1/500th of a second. That would mean it opened and closed within 1/500th of a second. If a car was driving by or a person was gonna throw a football, I could capture that image and freeze it in time because I'm only capturing 1/500th of a second. So say it took me 1 second to throw a football, it's as if that got slivered into 500 little tiny pieces and I could pull a literal moment out of that. The opposite is if say I wanted to slow the shutter speed down and say I took it for literally 1 second. I pushed this button, the sensor moved up, 1 second went by, and then it closed. Usually you might have to do that at night if it's darker because you're gonna let in lots of light. And we're gonna do something called light painting. You definitely do that with light painting because you wanna be able to move a light and expose it to the sensor and then you capture an image. But you also sometimes will do that with landscapes, right? You might do it with water. If I had a mountain in the background with a river and a waterfall in front of it, I may open my shutter for 1 second. The mountain's not gonna move, it's locked in place, so it'll still look fixed. But now the water is gonna flow and you get like a silky water look because you exposed it for 1 second and then closed the shutter. So a longer shutter speed will blur an image. So if you're ever taking pictures of sports and you're finding them to be blurry because the person is moving so quickly, you have to up the shutter speed. You gotta capture that moment quicker in time. But once again, now here's the tough part. if I'm opening and closing the shutter really quickly, I'm not letting a ton of light reach the sensor because I'm opening and closing it super fast. So maybe you have to open the aperture so more light can enter because you're only exposing the sensor for a little bit of time. You need as much light as possible. So that's how those two work, right? These two things are gonna work, or three of them, are all gonna work in sync together. You can't change one without thinking about the other two. So aperture is in the lens, shutter speed is in the body. That's when you see the fraction, 1/500th of a second or 1/30th of a second. It's referring to how quickly the lens will open. Then the last step is the sensor. And if you've ever heard of mirrorless cameras, right? Inside this body is also a mirror. And that mirror reflects the light, goes up, comes out. The actual viewfinder, if you have a mirrorless, that mirror goes away. And instead, you're seeing the sensor, right? So at the back of your camera is well, inside though, not just the screen, but there's a sensor, and that sensor's information will come to a little tiny screen. So if you have a mirrorless one, this is a little tiny screen that you're seeing what the sensor sees. So light travels through the aperture, comes allowed to pass through the shutter, reaches the actual sensor, and this is where we have something called ISO. ISO is referring to how sensitive the sensor is to capturing light. I said this on day one. All these devices are devices that capture light. And all you're trying to do is manipulate this tool to capture light, whether by letting light in and out through an aperture or exposing the sensor from a shutter speed, or literally changing the sensitivity of the sensor. Those are three ways that we are controlling light. So with an ISO 100, and that's just the number, that's referring to the best quality image you can get on that sensor. That sensor is saying, I'm gonna give you the best image quality I can give you, set me at ISO 100. But it's not very sensitive to light. It'll give you the best quality, no grain, super crisp, but it's not super sensitive to light. Which, if it's daytime, ISO 100 is great. This starts to become an issue as we progress into dusk. It kind of starts to get dark outside. And then if you take a picture, you're like, well, it's too dark. I can't really see anything. You might change the ISO to be ISO 500 or ISO 1000, which means the sensor is going to be more sensitive to light. Which, once again, if you're taking pictures on your phone is doing that almost automatically. Or you hit that night mode, where it's night. These are all just different words that a phone would use as opposed to a camera, where it'd be like night mode. Okay, let's make your ISO higher, make the sensor more sensitive to light so the image can see more in darkness. And this is what is fascinating about our eyes, right? It's called dynamic range. Our eyes don't ever get really overexposed to things that are too bright, or at night, it's not like we can't see things in the dark. Our eyes automatically change all these things instantly. Even for shutter speed, our eyes pretty much see at 35 frames per second. That's how we view the world, right? If someone's running super quick, I can't see every single sliver of their movement because I'm only seeing at roughly 35 frames per second. That's what we view the world at. So once I've made my camera have a higher ISO, all of a sudden I can see things better in the dark, but you start to get it, it's what we call it when it's a little grainy. And I'll put up an image right now showing what grainy looks like. Usually that's when something that's supposed to be black starts to come out being a little bit gray and it looks speckled rather than being something that you're looking, like say I had a black t-shirt on, like it being solid, like my chair being solid black, it would start to have noise and be grainy. So our activity this week is you're gonna go on to Canon Explains Everything, which is a computer program where it's gonna show you an image of a bedroom with a toy plane with a propeller spinning. It's gonna give you an instruction. It's gonna say blur the background, but stop the propeller spinning in time. So you'd have to figure out, it's like, okay, if I need the background to be blurred, that means, and you're just clicking on the computer, you don't take this like as a real picture. I would have to make my aperture be really big, which means you make the number small, right? And I know that's counterintuitive to the way normal thinking happens, but a big aperture has a small number like f2.8. So if I made my aperture f2.8, I know I would be blurring the background, large opening. Conversely, say everything in the picture isn't focused. You could see the bed in the background and the toys, you could see the plane, you can see the pencil crayons in the foreground. Everything is super crisp. That means you'd want a very small aperture, but that's a big number. That's like f22. And I know it's such once you get your head around it, you'll be good. But a small aperture means a big number like f22, and now everything will be in focus. The first couple times you try it, you might get it wrong, where you're like, I don't get this. Try to, when you're moving the dials, look at the little pictures to see if it's a blurry picture or a crisp picture, and just see if the dial, like the actual little pictures when you're moving the sliders, helps you, okay? Once again, there'll be an instruction video to help. You might get the first couple wrong. Don't worry about that. That's what learning is, right? We're learning it. We're trying to figure out what these three settings mean, and the more you can lock these in, the easier it will be to understand it. If you are having trouble, I'm going to recommend please go back to the first section of this unit where all those readings were. There's lots of diagrams there that will help you understand how you're supposed to navigate through this little thing with aperture shutter speed ISO. Okay? It's fun once you get it. It becomes super enjoyable that you're like, oh, okay, I understand how to actually get a picture to be exposed. Now, DSLR camera, mirrored cameras. When I'm looking through the viewfinder, the mirror reflects the light and I see the world as the world actually is. So if I'm here and I take a picture, usually I have to look at the screen to be like, did my picture turn out? Was it overexposed or was it underexposed? And then adjust my settings from there. If you get a mirrorless camera, when you look in the viewfinder, you're looking at a screen which is showing what the sensor sees. So you're not seeing the world, you're seeing a screen that the sensor has already computed the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO, and the picture you see is the picture you get. That's the nice thing about mirrorless cameras. So I'm a person that shoots with DSLR camera, right? It comes through, bounces off a mirror, comes out the viewfinder. I am very excited about eventually one day getting a mirrorless camera, which what I'm looking through and seeing in the viewfinder is exactly what my picture will turn out like. So then just as I'm looking through my camera at the world, I can adjust shutter speed, aperture, and ISO while looking through it to ensure that I get a very good exposure. Where this one, when I'm looking through, and I'm gonna say a little bit of a, this is more grade 10, 11, and 12. There is, when you're looking through the viewfinder, there is a little dial on the side that shows you, is it overexposed or underexposed? But it's just a little slider on the side. And for most people, they forget to look at the little dial that goes up and down the side. So it is there to kind of show you if it's overexposed or underexposed, but it's nowhere near as user-friendly as a mirrorless, which is where technology is going, right? Like when I talked about, where is this, like a phone camera gonna be with blur in the background in 10 years? Technology improves, and it improves quickly. So even if you're a person who's like, oh man, I would really love to have one of these cameras, in 5 years, 10 years, who knows what phones, right? We're at iPhone 15 right now, who knows what iPhone 20 is gonna have? It could have all kinds of little adapters, and not kind of the adapters that go on now, but even more advanced, and make it almost like it's a real camera with different abilities that you could change aperture size and do all kinds of different things, right? It's the future, who knows what it'll hold. All right, in the back here, I've also made some charts. It didn't quite show up as easy as I thought it would be able to see it in the picture. But I have my aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. I have these posters that I always look at to kind of quick reminder that it's like, oh yeah, we can also do things like hyperfocus. And if you get the aperture right with a certain distance, you can start getting things called hyperfocus where your images are super crisp, right? So there's all kinds of next steps you can add once you start to understand these first concepts of how these three things interact and then where it goes from there. All right, so this week, you're not taking any pictures, you are completing the Canon Explains Everything, and then you are uploading your results into the assignment Dropbox or into the discussion post. You're putting in the results. So you're gonna screenshot the ending when it shows you your result. I don't need your first try. I would love it if you did it a couple times until you did get perfect, right? Then maybe below you're saying, it took me 5 tries to get perfect, but I got there, right? If you get your first try and say you got them all wrong, don't submit the all wrong ones and just be like, I couldn't figure it out. It didn't work. I couldn't. Well, try it a second time. Try it a third time. And then definitely by the 5th time, you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm starting to understand aperture, shutter speed, right? Because if it's saying the propeller on the airplane needs to be moving, I want you to think of this answer right now. I need the propeller to be moving. How fast do I make the shutter speed? The answer might be like 1/30th of a second or 1/10th of a second or 1/8th of a second. Something low so that you're capturing the blur. If I said, I want you to freeze the propeller in time, so it didn't even look like it was spinning, it just stuck there. That's when you might be using the 1/500th or 1/1000th of a second because you had to freeze the propeller in time. You had to have a really fast shutter speed. This is a fun week. It's a fun week to try to figure out what do these 3 settings mean and how do they all interact together. All right, I look forward to seeing your results. Do not worry if the first try doesn't go as planned. Definitely do it again. Screenshot it. And with if you're a person who is using the computers, Windows Shift S, so Windows Shift S will allow you to like take a screenshot, right? And if you're a person who still has an iPad, well, just screenshot it, right? You push the home button, push the power button, you get a picture of a screenshot. But if you're with the new laptops, hit the window button, Shift S, and then trace over top of your result, okay? Have a good week, guys. I want you thinking about ISO, shutter speed, aperture.